And are you going to hit start webinar?
We have dance-offs in my office now.
Ooh.
We're doing shuttle bus karaoke in 2 weeks. We're going to do a pop-up. Me and the ACNO. I'm going to be in the back with the speaker, and she's going to be up front with her microphone. People aren't going to know. We're just going to be sitting on the bus, and then we're going to burst out.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
It's so against me. I mean, like I am very shy about this stuff, but I'm like, we gotta bring some joy back to people. So.
Oh, hi everybody. Oh, I love watching everybody pop on. This is making me
People are hopping in the chat already. Hi, David.
David.
Hi, Janet from San Diego.
Goodness. And Cindy from Cincinnati.
Love it.
All right.
We're just going to let a few more people pop in before we get started.
Oh, look at all these people.
Lindsay from Minnesota.
Happy Nurses
Monica.
Week.
Yes.
Pretty awesome.
Oh, Leah, I love Leah's on. We get to meet she and I in multiple ways.
People from
This
all
is gonna be
over.
fun.
Jody from Nebraska.
Yay, Jody from Nebraska. My old stomping grounds.
Ooh, the Lost Angels.
So fun.
Annie from New Hampshire. I'm from New Hampshire. I'm
Are
in
you?
Florida now. I've migrated.
Somebody said to me, they're like, do you want to move like back to, I said, I have a house in Boston. I'm going back there one day to retire. Retire.
I love it up there.
I said, I'll
It just snows a
consult. I'll
lot.
just sit at the Cape and
In the meantime, we'll go check on it for you.
I'm
I
telling
would
you,
assume these folks would come and check on your house with me.
yes, we need to have a retreat there.
That would be so fun.
Oh my gosh.
This is
I'll
just
sit-
the beginning of fantastic things we're going to do together.
Thank you, Leah. She said my earrings were fantastic.
They
Gotta
are.
represent
You have the best
Sonova.
earrings ever.
So I have Leslie made me a bracelet, Cy, and on it it says enough.
Oh, I
And
love
she
that.
didn't
And that's
even
before
know.
I read the book.
Before the book, I
That
love
was
it.
before I read the book.
I love it.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm quoting you, Cy, a little bit. I have to give some closing or opening comments in the Nurse Week kind of events, and I'm actually got a few quotes I got to choose from though. Because I'm trying to make it. You know, the theme about nurses is just nurses and the impact and what they, you know, and so there's so many things that I want to say, and I only have like 5 minutes. I'm like, could you give me 10?
Hard. Those are hard. TED Talks are hard because they're like, here's 10 minutes. You're like, oh.
I know, and there is just so many, you know, things to show that nurses make a difference. But I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. Well, it is Nurses Week, so it's very fitting. That's exactly the reason why we moved this webinar back 2 weeks, was to make sure that we were having this masterclass during Nurses Week.
Yay.
So it's very exciting.
I almost showed up with my nursing cap, but I just don't think many people know what that is anymore.
Well, okay. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Leslie, are we recording?
We are recording. We are official.
And I'm so glad everybody is chatting in where they are from. So that's great. Continue to do that. We'll be watching the chat as we go through. And are we all ready? Is everybody ready?
Yay.
Let's
So
do
exciting.
it.
Like with all my favorite people, and I'm still at my house. I love it. All right. Well, good evening. Happy Nurses Week, everyone. And thank you for joining this reality-based nurse leadership masterclass with Cy Wakeman tonight. I'm going to hand this webinar over to Leslie at some point, but I want to do some introductions first. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lori Gunther, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Sonova Associates. We are a nurse leadership company. I am joined here by Sonova's Executive Board Chair and the Chief Operating Officer at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Jody Coombs. Welcome, Jody. And also from Sonova, we have Leslie Almonte, our external Chief Marketing Officer from Moonshine. Welcome, Leslie. Leslie, we're so happy to have her. Melissa Gale, my business partner, is off on vacation in Antigua. How lucky is she? And then, of course, we have New York Times bestselling author and leadership guru, Cy Wakeman. So welcome, Cy. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thrilled.
So why are we here? Why did we decide to do a free masterclass? So as I mentioned, Sonova is a nurse leadership company, and we have 26 years of experience educating, empowering, and transforming nurse leaders. And I have to say, over the past 2 years, I have been on a personal mission to create what I like to call a revolution of recovery that I think is so desperately needed in healthcare right now. I'm going to say that again. I think we need a revolution of recovery. And if you all agree with me, I'd love to hear it in the chat. I met Cy over a year ago virtually in 2020, but it was a full year later when she walked into a hotel and I literally went running towards her because I was so happy to see her. And she was there to keynote the biggest event in our company's history. And I think in that exact moment, I felt like everything was going to be okay. And why? Because we were all together in person. But not just that, because we were all nurse leaders and everybody was ready and willing and wanting to learn, and more importantly, evolve their practice. After her presentation, I remember hugging her and I could see all of the tears falling from her face, that she was as moved as everyone in the room as to what you healthcare leaders needed right now in this moment. And Cy, do you remember this? We walked off stage.
I do.
And you looked at me and said, we need to do more.
Yeah.
We need to do more. And I think we need to
trying
partner
to
together.
reach this audience, and that do more is so important to me. Oh my gosh, that's it. That's the moment.
I think this is a picture of Cy. You can tell she's got a tear in her eye. Like that was a moment.
Yeah.
That was a moment. And when we were all standing there and looking out at that crowd, and you had just delivered just an hour and a half of leadership development and training and engagement and talking with them, and what they took away from it was amazing. And that was the beginning of what you're seeing in front of you, which is the evolution of a partnership between reality-based leadership and Sonova. And so we're going to go ahead and get started and talk a little bit more about what we want to do together. And I am going to turn it over to Leslie, and I'll be watching in the chat.
Awesome. So I think where I want to start really is with Jody and talking about, the reality of what our nurse leaders are facing today. So Jody, we met at the NICU Leadership Forum back in April. And since then, you've been doing a lot of traveling, my friend. You've been all over talking to nurse leaders and executives all over the country, and really just getting the pulse of what the reality is out there. So we've been talking this week, or over the past couple of weeks, just kind of channeling what are the top 3 challenges these nurse leaders are faced with. And Jody's honed in on 3 for us that we're going to share with you guys and have a discussion around today. So I'm going to pull that up right now. So the first one is staffing. The second one is well-being, resiliency, and joy. And then the third is error prevention and psychological safety. So let's start with the staffing question, which I'm sure everybody's ready to talk about. So Jody, tell us a little bit about what you're hearing, and what it's like for you to have a key team member leave, and even more so, what is it like to have to not be able to safely staff your units?
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Recently we lost an amazing leader here at Children's Mercy, and it was a huge loss. Even for me at my level as the Chief Operating Officer, I felt a sense of loss. I was asking myself, why could we have done something to save her? What could we have done? It was very, very hard. And I know that we're facing this great resignation. And, you know, as I was traveling the last month or so, you know, this is a topic that's among the executive level as well as the frontline level around this great resignation. And we know that people are exhausted. They're leaving. This nurse leader who's leaving, she's leaving and she doesn't have a job. She's just done. She's tired. And it, you know, any person who leaves is tough, but to see that somebody is so exhausted that they're leaving with not even a job and they don't care. They just can't do it anymore. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it leaves me as an executive to really think about what we have to do differently, how we invest in our leaders and our people and our teams in a different way that we have never done before. We are reimagining what we can do to save people, prevent this great resignation from taking over. You know, we've already been through a really crazy 2 years. We don't need to, you know, continue down this path of losing amazing people to our profession. I mean, it's Nurses Week. I mean, happy Nurses Week, everybody. And we're losing people to our profession. It breaks my heart because I know how much I cherish being a nurse. I know it probably breaks all of your hearts when you see that people are leaving just because of exhaustion. You know, your question, Leslie, about, you know, what do you do when you can't staff your unit safely? I bet you this keeps you, every one of you on this podcast, it keeps you up at night. It keeps me up at night. And I'm a few layers above, and I still go home every night thinking, I hope the units are staffed okay. I hope we all can give safe care, because I know you walk through the doors every single day, and that's what you're thinking. When I was in your shoes, I remember I spent the bulk of that, and that was way pre-pandemic and pre the last 2 years. You spend a ton of time with this. And I think that, you know, one of the things that we're thinking about and I'm hearing in my travels with other leaders across the country are outside of the box solutions. We cannot think the same way anymore. We have to be flexible. We have to think, you know, I remember when I started nursing, there were 8-hour shifts, and then we went all to 12, and we were really rigid, and you had to do things a certain way. We have to be flexible, or we're not going to get through this together. Job sharing, things again, outside the box. Breaking down silos. When I first got to Children's Mercy, there wasn't all the floating happening or helping each other, realizing. So breaking down those silos, there's so many outside the box solutions, but that is something that we have to think about in order to staff, you know, and making sure that we are communicating and bringing actually your frontline staff to the solution. And so those are, you know, in the context of, you know, staffing, those are the things that are top of mind, I'm sure, for all of your executive teams, as well as you all.
And I wanna push that to Cy too, because I see her taking notes, and I know
Am I writing ideas down?
She was like, I'm ready. Put me in, coach. So
Yeah. And what I
what are your
love
thoughts around
about
that?
this masterclass, which is so cool, is, you know, Jody's just fresh from fingers on the pulse, and you know what everyone's talking about. I'm also now back out and trying to quickly develop practices and ways of thinking for people to see things differently. And at Reality-Based Leadership, our practice is we really have a methodology. First thing we do is we work to interrupt thinking. And the reason we interrupt thinking is we want to get you away from seeing it the way you've always seen it. I have, you know, 12-hour blocks, and everybody works like 3 of those. And, you know, we just do the Tetris game and continue to stare at the holes. And we've done that for years and years and years. And so we want to interrupt people's thinking. And then we want to reveal what's more true, because most of our limitations are based on storylines we've picked up on. And so we really want to do evidence-based in our practice. And then we want to try on, not the solution for size, but try on some, make some invitations to say, what if you got curious about this? And what if we had conversation with people that are currently on the front line and people that aren't even in nursing? And what if we could look for better practices? And, you know, how could we? And then, because what happens when you get something new, you're overwhelmed. is my job too is to settle your mind back down, because you're like, oh my God, so I have to do a whole new staffing model in the next 3 weeks. And I'm like, never said that. We're just practicing with some mental flexibility. And in fact, I want you to just take this one small area and try it on for size and see what it leads to. And the reason I bring up our methodology is that, we'll be doing a lot more work together. And that's really how I come into this. And so a lot of people are hurting over staffing and their morale is low, not necessarily just because staffing isn't ideal, but because we have come together with sympathy, not empathy, and we've created a lot of very sad stories about staffing. And one of the things I would encourage you to do, to give you some practical tips, first, clean up your language. I'm out there and people are like, well, the travelers. I'm like, we don't have travelers. We have staff that come to us from many different ways. Like, we're resourcing this from many different ways. And they really are just colleagues or team members or advanced practice, nurses.
I love that.
And so we've got to change. Even our language divides and depresses us. Oh my gosh, I can't take it that travelers make more money than, well, let's look at our reality. Whenever I've answered a code, and I'm lowest person on the totem pole, I'm social work. Okay. It never mattered to me that the anesthesiologist made 14 times my salary, or that perhaps somebody was there that was sharing their resources with us from another unit that had a higher level of care. And so a lot of us are focusing in and doing what I call intellectualizing our feelings into grievances. We're scared about staffing. Let's just acknowledge that we want safe care. But the minute we say we're miserable because they make more, we're miserable because we have too many novices, whenever we connect our morale to an external circumstance, I tell you what, we are adding story and suffering to our reality, which is tough enough and painful enough. So I love for people to just really look at what they're believing and they're thinking and the language that they're using. And clean it up. And that's a micro boundary to set for folks. Often people are like, and I haven't huddled with my own team since pre-COVID, but the story is still the same. Cy, the staffing ratio is unsafe. And that is such a statement of outsource. The ratio is on a computer screen or a piece of paper. It's an inanimate object that's a number. Whether it is unsafe or not has a lot to do with us. And, I always joke, I would tell them, I'm not a nurse, but if you assign me 6 patients, first thing I would do is put them all in one room together. And I would figure out like who still had reasonable judgment and eyesight. And I would say, Harry, you're watching Ralph. And if he tries to get out of bed, we need your help, ring your call button because he needs help when walking. And I'm not trying to make light of your situation. But I do know that we have genius in the collective, and resiliency isn't about individuals. And when we come together in the collective and we are thinking inside the box, one of our tools, not outside the box, what needs to change in the world, but what can we do together right now that would make this better? And it may not be the overall solution, but it may be the next step to a better plan and solution. And that takes a certain type of leadership to really work this. We're in a great resignation. If I were you, I would use that to my full capacity. If I'm going to lose people, I want to lose people that are not regrettable. Like, here is what I need from you. And if you can't marry up to that, if I give you good information, I'm not opposed to people leaving. I think this is a good time to ensure that the people who do leave you are the right people. It's a big opportunity. And the real shortage right now, and this sounds very competitive, and nurses aren't probably competitive enough, but the great shortage is not staffing. The great shortage are incredible places for high accountable, professional, dedicated staff to work. So if you're being chased by a tiger, you don't have to outrun the tiger, you have to outrun the person next to you. Now, this sounds awful, right? But when my boss would come to me and he would talk to me about staffing levels, I'm like, I have a waiting list. When my team would say, you know, we get people in, but they don't stay, I would say, what are you as a team creating in an environment, and how attractive is it? And what's your part in that? How are you enabling or accepting or, you know, benefited negatively, but benefited by what's happening? And so much of leadership is managing energy away from why we can't and why we're doomed to how we could. What if we could? How can we? And what I'm so excited about is for the last 20 years, I heard nurses asking for a seat at the table. And first of all, there's nothing at the table. Judy can, like, if I didn't have to go to the table anywhere, I'd be fine with that. Not to downgrade our wonderful administrative pieces. But there are important moments right now for nurses to step into with practices that have, you know, risen from the groundswell and from the research and from the work you've done and the things you've known. And in the absence, you know, somebody's going to fill this vacuum, and I hope it's nurses and nurse leaders, because I've been all around healthcare, and the people who have the most comprehensive way of knowing and the holistic care we're all seeking is the nursing model, no matter which model you're practicing for a care model. So I love that. Hey, Kim Regis, I love it. She's on. So it's exciting. And I guess that's what I would say. I have a lot more to say about staffing, but it's important that we get a more sustainable leadership model in place for nurses so that people don't have to leave feeling burnt out. And, you know, we face that on our team too. I gave people sabbaticals of 1 month and 2 months and 3 months. It wasn't just you have to stay or you have to go. It was, how can we change the question? What do you need right now? And let's figure out what type of commitment you want to have in the future. But I'm not going to have somebody leave my organization that we chewed up and spit out. Let's get you well. And then let's talk about from that perspective, what your life choices may look like. And, you know, there's just a lot of creative things going on.
Can I have a quick question there. I was thinking about something you said, and Jody, something you and I have talked about a lot, which is how transparent we are as leaders with our own struggles and what happens if you need to take a vacation. You know, I even just Melissa leaving for this week and not being here for this, there was so much anxiety. I can't imagine the challenges that you're having as a nurse leader, or all of them are having, in terms of the guilt of taking care of themselves, taking a day, taking a week. Can you imagine requesting a sabbatical of a month? And Jody, when you said you offered a sabbatical, I was like, oh my God, did that work? Because I think there's so much guilt and shame about, one, that you need it and not wanting to tell people that you actually need a break. And then two, how do you actually take time off? Is there a model where people can take time off? So I don't know, Jody, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, I think it's something we have not historically, we haven't done well. We don't like to admit that, you know, we need some time away. I remember 20 years ago, when you'd say I need a mental health day, it was like a sign of, you know, that you were weak or you weren't a good leader. And Lori, you hit on it, and Cy did as well. We have to speak up. We have to find our voice, and we have to say, look, I want to do this job. I want to continue, but I need a break. And when we started talking as a team here at Children's Mercy about what a sabbatical could look like, you know, it's because right now you'll hear the word, well, you need to take a leave of absence. And that just doesn't seem, it seems weird. That wording does matter. And that's what we're talking about. It does matter. It makes it sound like, again, like you have a problem. And I would just, you know, challenge everyone to be okay with talking to your leaders and talking to your teams and being like, let's figure out how we help each other. Maybe it's a, you cover for me while I take a break and take the time to recharge and fill my cup, and you play off each other, so that it's, you know, because some of you are sitting there going, well, how do I do this? And my leadership won't support it. Hey, you don't know if they're going to support it unless you pitch it. You don't. Yeah. And I hate to say this, some leaders are outside of the box thinkers at my level, and some are not. And there's no perfect organization, but you can go pitch ideas and you should go do that. And if you don't, then, you never know until you try. But it is really critical. I have recently, at my level, been trying to role model, practice what I preach. And it's that authenticity as a leader that we all have to have, no matter what level you sit in. And Cy's right. Trust me, that at the table, you can have a seat at the table in a different way than just being in the C-suite.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, please speak up. Take charge of your own destiny and take charge of your well-being. You set the example that way to your teams then. And no matter what level you are setting examples somehow.
So true. And there's so many great comments, the wisdom of the collective, coming through. I love the private Facebook book. I know Wambi is in some of your organizations, and there's just such a collective community of positivity. The reason I like the word sabbatical, even if it's a week, is with sabbaticals, you have to make a plan, not just I'm going to take time off, because if you're not careful, you'll take time off to self-soothe, not self-care, not to regroup. And so in the academic world, if we apply for a sabbatical, we have to have a plan, not of stuff to do, but just what are the goals of the sabbatical. And so when I've asked for time off, and I just got interviewed by the Skim, when you need to take whatever space or time for yourself, it is great to say, here's what I'm asking directly from you, and here's what I'm willing to do with that time and to get it. And here's what I'm shooting for when I come back. For those of you that people are needing to take care of themselves and leave, it is a snapshot in time. Stay connected with those people, even if they leave you to go to another organization. Make sure that you are connected to them, that you stay in their community, their support group, and come back at times and make sure the invitation is there to come back, I think is so important. And the key to this, though, when we talk about recovery, I'm an addictions counselor from way back. When we talk about recovery, step one, we get your wounded butt in a chair and we see you as an individual, and we hold space for how much pain you're in. And we love you up in a way that, we provide you some hope, and the community group around you is like, I've been there, you can move out of this. And from that recovery, then we do start to have you look at your part in this, and where you're unskilled in the way you have walked through the world, and where you have been stunted maybe in your ability to move through feelings, or if you have trauma, what you need to do for your own psychological safety instead of just wishing the world would do it. And so there's very intentional things. And I would tell you that the people who tend to recover find connection. Connection is, the key to any recovery. It's not discipline, and it's not, consequences. And, if people quit enabling us, it's a little easier. But what I have found when it comes to recovery is the way that we've been there for each other has been pretty enabling and pretty dysfunctional. And, I'm not anti-alcohol, but then I see like, I'm so stressed, I need a glass of wine. And I'm like, no, it will interrupt your sleep, and it will like depress you more than it and I'm not an anti-drinker, but I just hear so many of the things we give people to go get yourself back together are not going to get them back together. And that's why I really think with this recovery, we have to revolutionize the way we lead and share accountability, not as a bad word, but enter into healthier relationships with self, healthier relationships with one another, and healthier relationships with the powers that be, that we come to them with direct asks, good data, good commitments, and then we aren't weak. We don't come from a weak victim position. And if somebody says no sabbaticals, I'm like, great, I'm going back to the drawing board to figure out how to get my people protected time. Like somebody wrote in here, time off is time off. And there's so many things we can do if the big ask isn't met in the spirit of the ask. It's like, how can I make this happen?
I think that,
oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I was just
So
going to say one thing we do, and I would just say to all of us, we self-inflict our own pain. We look at our emails, we pick up the phone, find somebody to cover you so that you can really unplug and really start that self-healing that Cy's mentioning. Like, I do it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take the week off. But we all have to practice this, because if we don't, then you really only partially unplug and take care of yourself.
It's so true. And ask yourself these reflective questions. What does the busyness cover up for me? I mean, these are really big questions. Like, where do I need to grow next to, intentionally turn things over to my team and replace myself? And it could be in my trust of others. It could be that I'm too critical. And when I see a situation that wasn't handled how I wanted it, but got handled, that I can let my standards, I'll never forget my first son. I was in graduate school, I was working full time, and I wanted a little help around the house. And so my counselor's like, ask for what you need. They can't read your mind. And I'm like, well, somehow I read my mind and mother this child. And I remember coming home just exhausted, and my husband was giving my baby our baby a bath. And I remember peeking in, and what should have been seen as the most cute, beautiful scene, because the baby's laughing at his dad and they're having a blast, is a horrific scene for Cy Wakeman, because my child's being washed like a car. He literally turned on the spigots, laid a towel out, took the naked baby up, ran him under the car wash, put him down, soaked him up, ran him back under, put him down. And I'm watching this whole thing and just was like, what are you doing? And I have a bathtub and you have to fasten the seatbelt. And now all the, the labor and delivery nurses and the NICU are dying laughing. And I didn't do that because the baby's smile hit me. And that's been lifelong learning for me, is widening my margin of what's good enough, because I'm very quick to get the margin of what's safe and what's good care, here. And and that's what we're going to do, a lot of talking in future months. We got some exciting things to talk to you about, but we're going to do a lot of talking for how do you modernize your leadership to get out of this manage work mode and instead manage energy and facilitate thinking and help people get really fluid in changing the way that we work together. And I think that's so important.
I totally agree. That was beautiful. So I think we've touched on the well-being piece a little bit, but I want to dig into the resiliency and joy part, because I know with well-being, that brings about the joy. So let's talk more outside of the sabbatical and taking time for yourself. How can we create well-being and resiliency and joy for our nurse leaders? And I'll start with you, Jody, on that one.
Yeah, it's so critical, because if we don't create resilience, and I do think this last couple of years, right? Think of all the things we had to pivot, we had to change quickly. We became resilient, whether you wanted to or not. And I think that's going to help sustain us. It's going to help us keep us wanting to show up every day. It is hard. There are days, personally, you've heard from me before, this last 2 years have brought me to my knees. I've shown emotion and that I'd never shown before. And one of the things I thought about was, how am I going to be resilient? How am I going to show up so that I can give what I need to give to the organization that I serve? And I think that through your well-being and taking care of yourself, you create resiliency. And I used to laugh at the airline when they said, put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your child. But they are right. If we don't put the mask on ourselves and take care of us and become resilient, and again, if you're tired and you don't take care of yourself, you can't be resilient and handle the things that get thrown at us every single day as leaders. And it's just critical. And you think about the joy, if we all think about why we became nurses, and especially this week, I reflect on it a lot. I loved it. I was so excited. In fact, I have a niece graduating here shortly with her nursing degree, and a brother in nursing school next year graduating. Why did they want to be a nurse? They've asked me why I wanted to. But at the same time, you have to find the joy. I intentionally now ask myself at the end of every day, what three things that today happened to me that brought me joy? Not just in large terms, day to day, and making it intentional so that you can start to really articulate today. You know what? Today I helped somebody really articulate their PowerPoint presentation around workforce. I was, behind the scenes, and I got to see 3 of my leaders shine. That gave me joy. Little tiny things, from whether you just helped a family who was lost in the hallways. I mean, it doesn't have to be big and audacious, but finding that resiliency, taking care of yourself, investing in yourself. You being here tonight is huge, right? And that will help your resiliency, and it will ultimately help you bring joy. So I think it's so interwoven together. You can't have one without the other. Or if and again, it's taking the time, being intentional.
Yeah. And I think too, when it comes to, and we're moving beyond using words mental health in our particular part of the industry, we're starting to talk about brain health, because any other organ, like if you had a health issue with your liver, we would never say, well, we'll try and get you in 6 months. In the meantime, do telehealth off the internet, so our brain, and our brains are throughout our body. We now know so much more about it. We know so little about it. But what happens for a lot of people is when they intellectualize their feelings, they then double down and rule out joy as an exclamation point to see how bad I'm suffering. So pain is inevitable. Pain is happening all around us. But a lot of people, you'll notice this when, I'll just tell the story from my book. My niece, right at the beginning of the pandemic, lost her son. So my great nephew was killed in a car accident. And she almost felt unloyal to experience any joy, because you might think she wasn't grieving. And I worked with a lot of folks where we just want to put "and" back into our human experience to make it 3-dimensional again, because we get so focused on the pain or the misery or the grief. And when I ask people, give me 3 words for how you're feeling, it could be from grateful to I'm grateful, we get this time together. Thank you, Brandy, for being grateful, for excited joy hearing, me and Jody in this program. And it's like, I can feel joyful, I can feel and devastated and scared and hopeful. And what we need to do as leaders is build back out the person, and not just accept this one-dimensional, I am exhausted, this sucks, I'm tired. So much of that is true, but there's also so much more to be built out. And a lot of us, myself included, I've had to pay special attention to my own well-being, and coming home and really saying, not just identify the points of joy, but how I get through life is I don't feel any of it. And if you're not feeling the pain, like I don't like to feel the heartbreak and grief, and you can't feel the joy. And what I know about my hardest job ever, I used to accompany highway patrol if they needed to go to a home. And somebody knows we had passed. I just had a very real memory that came up of a very sweet lady. And what people did who felt their pain, and often they did, they would just like almost collapse. And it took like 20 minutes and uninterrupted, totally supported, no toxic positivity, no pushing people, obviously, to see the bright side, just space held. It always was like 20 minutes. And then they would regain composure. And they would say, they would either ask where the person was, want information, or they would crack a joke, which seems inappropriate, but they were like, if that's what had to happen, it makes sense it happened this way. And then in that grief process, people would vacillate between joy and grief. And if you as a facilitator were willing to hold space for it all, and normalize it all. You didn't lock somebody. If you're a good mom, you got to be stuck in grief. And it's like you gave people space. Let's not make COVID, let's not make what happened about how tough it was. Let's make COVID about all the experiences we had and how we're going to use it for fuel to create a better workplace and worldplace. That's our co-creation.
Gosh, I love that. You're totally triggering me, Cy, in a good way.
Good.
I'm a crisis counselor by
Donald.
training. And I remember I was working in victim services and I had to be fully present. It was constant crisis all the time. And we are trained to not show emotion, right? That we are there. We are, and I struggle immensely with that. I'm getting way better at it. But, you know, when you're trained to not show emotion, or to be personally reflective in sessions with traumatized, you know, I was working with sexual assault victims at the time, it's you kind of bottle it up and you hold it in. And then I had a sick baby. And I was so traumatized by my experience. And so I knew that somebody said, you can't, if you are really struggling, how can we take care of a vulnerable population? And I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I thought that would have been my life's work. And I knew that I couldn't, so I stepped away. What did I do? I took a job to work in the NICU. And so people were like, you're leaving one crisis type environment to go to another one. But I had so much joy in that environment where people would have thought, well, that's another crisis environment. How can you thrive and heal in that environment? It was because that was my choice. That was my drive. I loved going to work every day because I loved the babies. I loved the nurses. I thrived in that high stress environment. So yes, I knew I needed a change for myself personally, and I did it. And it was the best thing I ever could have done, was listen to myself and say, okay, so I need some time and maybe something different because I need some healing. But that doesn't mean that you have to change completely what your passion or your joy is, right? So my joy is always going to be working. My dad used to call me Captain Chaos, because I like working in a crisis environment. That's where I find my drive and my excitement. And so I just am thinking about that even now when I feel overwhelmed or stressed. It's like, what exactly gives us that initial drive and excitement? It was always like the first time a mom held a baby. And that you could see that and look at that and be like, oh my God, I in some way was part of that. And even when there's immense sadness and there's a loss, you could have been part of that moment to make it beautiful for that family. And that's what I loved. And that's why all of these nurses come back to work every day. And I think is that sometimes we lose our touch point. And sometimes you need to go and come in on night shift, or you need to stop your meetings and go feed a baby or talk to a family, or call your nurse friends, or listen to Cy Wakeman and be like, okay, there's still joy in our industry. We just maybe haven't let ourselves feel it because we're completely shut down, because that's how we've been trained to be.
And that's the key, because there's a time to be a nurse, there's a time to be a leader, and there's a time to be a human. And I see a lot of confusion and the people I coach, they're like, yeah, but I want to tend to them. I really understand the mental health issue behind this. I'm like, but you're their leader, not their nurse. And then a lot of times, you know, it's like, oh, being human. I think at times we think this is predetermined, that we will come out traumatized from these experiences. And there have been some traumatic experiences, and we've all, you know, seen it, watched it. Many of you have been in it. But if you listen to like Basil van der Kolk and like the experts in trauma that are really studying conversion, and they tell you that a traumatic experience does not mean trauma. In fact, when we test you, and like the ACE tests and stuff, we test what traumas happened, but we test what resources you had to make sense of that. And so like I fared better in my family, coming out of my family, because I was really good in school. So I had so many teachers and so many coaches and so many employers that did not let my interpretation of what happened be the final answer. They really challenged my interpretation. We need to hold space for people's feelings and what they're experiencing, but we need to be very careful to not validate their interpretation of what they're experiencing. And that's what leadership is post-COVID, is to move beyond that. And so what is happening right now, when something traumatic happens, it is stored in a different part of the brain than memory, and it stays unprocessed. And so people start seeing so much through this little peephole of that trauma view, and it doesn't get converted. And what a lot of our jobs as leaders is to help convert that trauma. And it's not always through talk therapy and intellectualizing, it is through body, breathing, feeling, moving. There's so many exciting things happening with MDMA and all kinds of stuff that we're finding out, but it's moving into the body. That's why we do talk about yoga a lot. People are like, if I hear one more well-being, where it's meditation and yoga, but what we know from the somatic sciences is that yoga does work out things, outside the body. And so I think from a leader, we tend to do the go-to, like, let's talk through this. And sometimes it's like, let's breathe and feel what the feels are and don't even have to know what it's about. And I personally have been doing a lot of work in that area so that I can come out and help people add to their leadership more than just talk therapy or intellectual processing. It's like, how do we do more than this? But leaders play a special role for post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic stress. And that's another piece we really need to be teaching leaders. There's a whole modernization that needs to happen in leadership. And quite honestly, of all the groups I work with, the people that are ready for it are nurse leaders. Because when I talk about MDMA, everybody else gets all nervous and nurse leaders are like, oh yeah, read the research, it's awesome. So it's like, or when I talk about feelings and breath work, nurse leaders are like, we teach breathing as part of almost every hard thing you have to do. We teach you how to breathe your inhaler with an extender. We teach you how to, breathe through labor pains. And so I really think that nurse leaders can really lead the recovery here and end up with a different position on the team that is much more highly regarded, because what people have learned over the last 5 years is the intellectual old way didn't work. And it's not getting people what they need. And there's a lot of nursing models out there that have answers about how we could actually get people what they need. So can you tell me, I went through my master's degree with a bunch of nurses?
Cy, what's interesting is you said, and the mindfulness, we actually started our COVID meetings and our incident command meetings with a mindful moment. And at first, I'll tell you, I was a little skeptical, but almost 90% of the people that were on this call showed up 10 minutes before the meeting so that they could participate. And the amount of just letting it go and getting into that moment and that mindfulness helped us make better decisions. And I think you're so spot on about what leaders can do. They can create that. They can have a mindful moment and create that mindfulness for their team before you get into all the energy that is now trying to manage the day-to-day. I think it's so spot on.
You can. And I love the comment that they put up about Dr. Gabor Mate. There's so much out there now to get informed about trauma and, so that we aren't trying to manufacture psychological safety, but that people have an understanding of how their mind works, how their body works, how their feelings work. And as a leader, that you're pretty much an expert in human psyche, and not that you have to treat people, but you have to know how to manage the mental processes, facilitate good mental processes for people. And so little silence is happening on units. So I just get back out there and I'm like, these units are so loud. Like, we used to worry about noise for the patients. Now I'm worried about noise for the staff. Like, can everybody let's just be quiet for 3 minutes and everybody just not think about anything. And so there's just little things somatically I think we can do too. I think, this recovery, we can make this exciting. We can really, I'll tell you what, nobody's watching us because everybody's so busy. We got a lot of freedom. We can do good things without, ruffling people's feathers.
I think that's great. So let's talk a little bit about error prevention and psychological safety. I know this is a huge hot button right now in the media and all over the place. So cue this up for us, Jody, and tell us, why you brought this forward and what you've been hearing.
Well, I think we all know about the Redonda bot case out of Vanderbilt, and I think it really rocked us to our core. I think people really started to sit back and say, we've worked so hard to create a safe space. Every day, the nurses are making decisions. I know that everybody's walking through the door trying to make that best decision for their patient and family. And I think that this case really rocked us to our core. I know it did me. And as I round on our staff, they're worried, as we've tried to say, you know what, we've got your back. We are going to try to create systems that keep you and the patient safe. There are most times when you peel the onion of an incident, most of the time it's a system issue. And the system set people up to fail. And so that's why I really thought about error prevention, and as an organization and as a healthcare industry, how do we continue down this relentless journey, which we have been. And then this case happens, and then people go, well, what happens if I make a mistake? I still remember my first mistake. It was on the NICU. I know what I was wearing, where I was standing, and I did not check a dopamine drip. I still remember that, baby. I still felt like a horrible, I thought my nursing career was over. I thought no one else in this world has ever made a nursing or has ever made an error. But my leader pulled me aside. We went through it. We talked about the practice, maybe what I could have done differently, how I should have checked my drip, etc. And at the end, she said, tell me 3 good things you did today. Tell me 3 good things you did. Now, I couldn't remember a thing other than I screwed up. Thank goodness the baby was okay. But at that point, I realized how important psychological safety was. I didn't know what that meant. All I knew was that I was going to be okay, and I was going to continue 25 years later as a nurse and as a nurse leader. But I think that we have to lean into this. And as scary as and as sad as this case is, you know, I rounded on our hospital last Thursday night, and 2 leaders said to me, you know, what do you, we don't know if we trust you all, and we don't know if we believe that you're going to have our back. And I leaned in and I said, let me be clear. We have your back. We have your back. And I think we have to do that. And you all have to have these discussions with your senior leaders so that we can not let this define us and not let it define how people feel safe. And it's, you heard Cy mention, whether it's a case like this, this Redonda thought case, or it's a case of you saying, I need to take a break. That's still psychological safety. Cy mentioned that earlier. We have to be okay with that. We have to be okay to feel safe to say, I need some time away. I need to heal myself. I need to take care of myself. And that to me is why I kind of put both of those together, but they're so important.
Oh my gosh, imagine if we advocated for ourselves the way we advocate for our staff, what would happen?
Or the patients. I've seen people go to the mat on, patients. I think it's really important as a leadership competency when things happen that just seem so extreme and egregious, that the best thing we can do is what I call hold the center. And so people are like, well, I could go to prison for, I'm like, let me hold the center for you. That was an egregious stop right now. They're appealing, like a lot more will come. For today, what do we know about holding the space for doing our best work, for trusting the people's intention that we work with, but not trusting their humanness, building systems, second checking my work. And I bring people down to when something out there at the macro is bad, let's use macro things to influence that, like lobbying and our associations. And on the micro, let's not clamp down in dysfunctional behavior in reaction to something egregious. And let's talk more about, let's hold the center. What do we know about errors? What do we know about error pretension? What do we know so far that we could move together safely? And yeah, I got your back. And by the way, when you're in this business, some things can happen, and you need to decide whether you're going to use the worst case scenario to take away your commitment, your profession, your gift, or if you're going to take as the risk we need to take, and let's surround you intentionally with as much support as possible. And that's called holding the center. So when I present an idea, people go to extremes. Like I'll say, there are some stupid questions, like constantly asking, like, why don't people tell me anything? A better question is like, what can I do to get the information I need? Well, when I hit ego, people go to extremes. They go, so people die from nurses not asking questions. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to just bring you back to center, because that's the ego taking a point and making it the whole point as a way to not have to take any action then. And so life's really messy, and we've got to get in the messiness of this together. And we have to see where the threats are. That is a huge threat to the practice of nursing, huge threat. And many other disciplines need to come to, the defense of this, because we're all doing it, but the only one that can administer it is a nurse, many cases. And so they're going to be the target because that's the first measurable error. But we all staff that patient. We all, we all have a hand in that. And so united we stand. But I think as leaders, a lot of people come to me with, this is the final straw, or now this happens. So therefore we can't expect any support. As leaders, be careful what you let people tie together, because the ego will tie things together that take us out of the game. And I want to disconnect things you've tied together and put you back in the game in a way that is doable. So
That's great. So I want to talk a little bit about how the reality-based nurse leadership program, how did this come about? Why this work is so important to you and Lori, and how people can get more involved in this and sign up and all of that too. So I'll open that up to Lori, so she can talk a little more about it.
Yeah, I don't think we've made the big announcement.
Yeah, no, okay, all right.
That's what everyone's been waiting for.
Yeah, so we're really excited to announce that we have a formal partnership now with Reality-Based Leadership and Sonova. So we're bringing together our two brands, our two knowledge and expertise to create a program for each of you. And when I was thinking about this, earlier today, I was saying our nurse leaders, when we announced this at our last NICU Leadership Forum, that we were going to do a program with Cy where you get to work with her over the summer with 49 other people, because there's only 50 slots. And what was that? Why are we doing this? Because it's important for you to have a peer group. It's important for you to have a leadership philosophy. It's important for you to be able to not just listen, but talk and learn and evolve your practice together. And this is just key for each of us. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it looks like, and then I'll let Cy talk a little bit more about the content. So what actually is it? And if you haven't enrolled, I would go ahead and do so today, because we are nearly, I think we have 36 seats left. That's it.
36,
Sonova,
yep.
36. So Sonova, and what I would also say is that you should advocate for yourself to have your tuition paid for by your executive leadership, that it's time for them to invest in you. And that's the way we built this, and we built a certification and a designation around it. So there's a lot of information. Leslie just threw up the registration on there. But the first step in getting your certification, which is your SNLC, is to take the Cy Wakeman class, the Reality-Based Nurse Leadership Program. And Cy, do you want to explain a little bit about what they would get within that class from you?
Sure. So I'm personally leading this class. We're keeping cohorts small to the 50. And I have 5 3-hour sessions for you. So we will go deep into hardwiring and fostering accountability, deep into aligning teams and getting buy-in, deep into leading change differently. And each 3-hour session has me presenting and tools that you get to practice and take back. Every other week, I also, so if you just did the learning session, we'll follow it on in the next week or 2, I think it was every other week, with a group coaching session. So instead of Jody and I doing all the talking, I would be on here and you all could volunteer to interact and chat with me and to talk. We'll give you all the books, the slides, the programs. You earn 15, a little bit over 15 CE credits. But we really want to take nurse leadership, and instead of piecing it together with all the different models, give you a foundation on how to modernize your leadership based in reality-based leadership and move it forward. So I'm excited about it.
Lori, you guys have a special value add happening until the 15th, right?
We do. And we'll be going through the program with you. And so one of the things that we learned from our nurse leaders was that you wanted a certification that wasn't just you studying for an exam, right? That you wanted applicable information, tools, and solutions, and you wanted to be able to apply it to practice. So we will be going through that program with you. And then we will be looking looking at how that certification and that knowledge can be applied within your specialization. So you can get your leadership certification in NICU or perinatal. I encourage you to look that up as well. And in doing that, what we wanted to encourage is for you to all come and be together. So if you sign up by May 15th, you're going to get your tuition paid for by Sonova to come to one of our nurse leadership forums, whether it be the one either in November for perinatal leaders or our NICU or perinatal next year, which will happen. And you can see that on the slide. And that is our give back to you, in that we want you to come together and not, and we can formalize sort of that certification and that learning process for you.
Awesome. So I'll post the link here. Make sure you're using all caps when you click on that link. It is important, or it might take you somewhere really strange. And I'll be posting that in the chat again. Let me just post that there one more time. And then we're going to open it up for some Q&A with Cy, if that's all right with you, Cy.
Yeah. And you
Perfect.
can register, and then we can invoice through your channels. But I'm so excited because I wanted to reach the nurse leader cohorts out there, and it's hard to commission bringing in a program for all nurse leaders at once in your organization. I think this is a way you can really advocate for yourself and for a few others, and really just say we want to recover, refresh, help lead this charge, and this would be a good way to do it. So most, not all, but most administrators are pretty happy if you're mentioning value-based leadership, because I've been out there enough, they know it works. Okay, so some questions. When does it begin? July 11th? Somebody help me out with details?
Yes, what I can do, Leslie, I'm going to just share my screen really quickly, which is, so if you come to the Sonova webpage, you can easily click on learning, and you can go into here and you can see the Cy program and all of how to register, but also all of the dates, and the value of the tuition is $5,000, in case I didn't say that. That is per person. And like I said, this is our first cohort, and we will, everybody has been asking us, will we run a second and a third cohort? And we're going to run this first cohort, and we are going to listen and learn and see what you guys need. And then we will come with more details to see if there'll be further cohorts after this.
And so they're on Wednesdays, 2:00 Central Time. If it's a learning session, it's 2 to 5 Central Time. We tried to be easy on the East Coast and easy on the West Coast, but those are the sessions.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions queued up in the chat?
And the one thing that I think I would say, and Jody, I think this is something that we've talked about, is that what pained me and what pains me when people say they're coming for their own personal development, professional development, and they say, oh, my hospital won't pay for it. Or, oh, it has to come out of pocket. I completely understand that. What I would say is advocate for yourself and your staff. You're worth it. And this is what I think executive leadership need to hear as well, which is we need to invest back into our staff, give them that time to develop, that we can all benefit from that. And that's so important.
Yeah, I think, Lori, it's really important. Sometimes we hear things like, well, budgets are tight, and it deters us. Whether you consciously or unconsciously say, well, I'm just not going to go ask for it. Go ask for it. Take the curriculum, sit down with your leader, walk through what this means to you and what value it will be for you as a leader. One of the things I will tell you is we have to invest in you all. If we don't invest, we're going to lose you all as leaders. And that's costly in and of itself. And not to mention, just catastrophic. We shouldn't be losing leaders because we can't invest, but walk through that curriculum, show them why, what value you can bring back to the organization, how you can teach your other peers, even how you're going to help lead your organization. More executive leaders are focusing on this now. And Cy said this, let's take this opportunity and seize the day. Like, this is a time where senior leaders are paying attention finally, but they are, and, go ask for it and don't be afraid, but seize the moment. And you know what? You ask for it once and they give you a lukewarm answer, go ask again. Don't be afraid. One no does not equal a forever no. And I learned that the hard way, but I'll tell you, they call me a honey badger here at Children's Mercy. And that's because I don't take no for an answer. And I get I'm at a different level of that, but don't take no for an answer. You're too important.
Love that.
Diane, that's a good point too. Orientating a new nurse. I've seen some of those numbers coming out. That onboarding process is 60 grand. And it's a good stay investment. And I might want to ask for that investment. I might, not overcommit. We don't have to grovel or beg, but just let people know that here's what I want to do with this investment in me and how I want to use it for the benefit of the organization.
Yep.
Yeah, let's post the link one more time. It's up on the screen as well. But it's
Oh my
certainly.
gosh, I'm very excited to watch. I know you can't see them, but I can see the registrations coming in. So that just makes me feel so good. And I can't wait for us to hold these classes and be working more cohesively as a group, because we're not just holding this to, we want to learn from you. This is incredible. We need a roadmap, out of this. How do we evolve beyond what we're in right now? And I think Cy and I are very excited. I'm going to be with Cy next Friday. I'm going down to meet with her. Melissa and I are so excited. And part of that is around making sure that your experience is the best possible experience that you can have with us. And yes, we will be on the beach, which is really exciting. So imagine the creativity that's going to come out of that.
And I'm excited. I've gotten a lot of beautiful invitations for what to do next in my work. My heart's always been in healthcare. When I look at readiness, I think nurse leaders are the most ready right now. The biggest difference I can make, and I want to focus on working with the willing, helping the people that have given it all. Let's regroup, let's recover together, let's modernize our leadership, and really show the model that we do not have to be done in by this, but we do need to be evolved by this, and we need to evolve others. We cannot continue to deliver care to the people we serve the same. It's just that we have to say no, and we cannot participate in, but we can show how we can modernize and update it. So would love to have you join us. So glad you joined the masterclass. We won't ever just sell to you. We'll always give you great content. So when you see us out there again doing more masterclasses, if this isn't your time, please join us, and we'll continue to try and support where we can. Yeah, definitely, Monica. When we learn better, we do better.
Right.
Love that.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Leslie and Jody and Cy. I'm so overwhelmed and excited and appreciative. Thank you to the over 200 people who joined us tonight, and to those of you who are watching it on demand. Yes, this will be available on our learning management system. Leslie, I think by Monday, is that what we said?
Yep.
Okay, so if you wanted to watch it again, or you want to share it with somebody, you will get an email. And also, if you follow us on social media, on Facebook or me on LinkedIn, we'll be posting where you guys can watch the recorded version of this. So thank you again. And I hope everybody has a great end of your Nurses Week. And thank you again for joining us.
Awesome. Sending everybody big love.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.